Welcome to Primetime, everybody, and we have a very special episode for you. This is our March Madness tournament. This is your March Madness directors bracket, and I am super excited. We have 16 directors, both old and new, pitting them up against each other to see who will reign supreme as the top horror director of all time. I'm your host, Hunter Chambers. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad and Carrie. How's it going, guys?
It's going great. I realized we could have just started with us in the middle and then bring up the bracket, but why not just get into this?
No, that's
Because
fine.
we decided, hey, Hunter's birthday was yesterday at the time of this recording. Happy birthday, buddy! And then
Thank you.
also, it's the very end of March, so we're like, Hunter was like, let's squeeze in a March Madness thing because we did one last year, and um,
Hmm.
it's it's always fun to kind of do brackets. And honestly, if you don't know, we've done brackets before in this, and we are trying to get back to doing a lot more of the brackets that we used to do. We've had ones that have been in like a heavy like hiatus,
Hmm.
but this was a really fun idea for Hunter. I know he loves to talk about like different horror directors and go through their filmographies and stuff. And I know like we could easily get in the weeds on these because there's just so much to talk about with different movies with all these directors. But really, I think it's kind of about just assessing, here or there, like, which director, I don't know, has maybe done the most, but also like looking at the quality of the films. Cause you could easily look at like something like, well, John Carpenter has directed more things than Mike Flanagan, but, what about the quality level is
Hmm.
kind of thing, and like assessing like how you feel. So, and really, because it's only the three of us, we're gonna do a best of three, of course, so the majority takes it. Um, and so we're gonna go through each matchup. And I used a special program to get these matchups, and hopefully it'll be really fun as far as pitting these different directors, and we'll see who takes it all, as Hunter said.
You can see my
Further,
cat in the background. He's just
oh, the
running
cat.
around my bed. Yeah.
Oh, what a cutie.
That's awesome. You can probably see one of our cats do the same thing. But let's go ahead and get in the first matchup. We have Mr. Alfred Hitchcock versus Jordan Peele. But Hunter, why don't you like think about and like give us your thoughts on these two and like who you would pick overall?
Okay, so we're looking at the Master of Suspense versus the new Master of Suspense, I would say, because Jordan Peele's movies are not really horrific, but they're very suspenseful, and I love that about him. Alfred Hitchcock is a legend when it comes to not only horror movies but just movie making in general. I think he is one of maybe top five directors of all time, but this is a horror specific list. His horror movies include Psycho, The Birds, Vertigo, Rear Window, classics. Jordan Peele is brand new, but if we're looking at just what he directed, Get Out, which was an Oscar nominated movie. Nope, which got visual effects nominations at the Oscars and was also very well received. And Us, which I think is a really great slasher. Not a lot of people like it. I absolutely love it. For me right now, Jordan Peele is 3 for 3. Alfred Hitchcock, I've loved Psycho. I think The Birds is okay. I think it's an okay, really good monster movie. Never seen Vertigo, and I think Rear Window is a very good suspenseful movie. But for me, I got to go with Jordan Peele just over quality of the three films that he gave us. He's 3 for 3 right now.
Okay, so moving on to me real quick. I would say I kind of agree with you. This is tough because Alfred
Hmm.
Hitchcock, like without Psycho, there probably wouldn't be a Get Out because I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure Jordan Peele has even said Alfred Hitchcock is one of his influences. Even if he didn't say it, it's like kind of obvious, that Alfred Hitchcock is just a very influential director just on so much. We won't say much about him as a person, but as a director, just one of the greats, of course. Like you said, you mentioned some of his great horror movies. You can even throw out Strangers on a Train and things like that. Like a lot about like people try or Double Indemnity, people like trying to
Mhm.
create, like the perfect murder and setting it up, and a lot of stuff about Alfred Hitchcock is just about like these macabre things about murder or kind of like the fear of what mental health is as far as like dissociative identity and things like that. So many great themes in a lot of these Hitchcock movies, and so much great suspense that like kind of showed people how to do suspense in a very cinematic way. So very influential. But as Hunter said, I think if you look at Jordan Peele had the benefit of looking through a lot of these older classic movies and kind of compiling them into making some of these great horror movies of the modern era that we've seen. Like you said, Get Out is not just a great horror movie that came out, but it's one that was nominated for Best Picture. Some might argue should have won Best Picture, and just had like so much going for it as far as like being one of the great horror masterpieces of today and of all time. So um just with the power of Get Out, but then also the divisive power of Us and Nope, I think these three movies are all very different but very great in their own way. And so you know it's hard to talk about horror without talking about Jordan Peele. As far as like Alfred Hitchcock, you could say he's more of a just great director in general that blends into different kinds of uh, filmmaking. Whereas Jordan Peele is very specific to horror, and Alfred Hitchcock is more of like a suspenseful, not just horror in general. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. This is like to start out with this matchup. I'm seeing all these matchups, and a lot of them are really tough. And I'm not looking forward to this in some ways because it is so tough. Like, I agree with you guys. I think Jordan Peele is 3 for 3. I love all three of his movies. I think they have really just like revamped the horror genre in our modern time. And I think he is such a staple of like 21st century horror filmmaking. On the flip side, Hitchcock like not invented the slasher genre, but he helped build the slasher genre for sure, as well as kind of the more psychological thriller aspects of the horror genre. I think just like, Jordan Peele has only gotten the chance so far to do 3 movies. And I hope we see way more of him and he continues to work in the horror genre. I think Hitchcock, though, I'm going to give it to Hitchcock because just so many of his films are so foundational and I think just really completely changed and built the genre as we know it today. And he just has so many classics like Psycho and Vertigo and Rebecca and
That's right.
what else? Like Strangers on a Train. There's just so many you can point to. So I think I'm going to go with Hitchcock. But it's really tough.
That's totally fair. Hunter was pretty square in the Peele camp. Carrie is pretty square in the Hitchcock camp. I was somewhere in the middle, but I leaned Peele. So we're going to go ahead and move on Peele in the bracket to face off
And people go crazy in the comments.
to face off against either John Carpenter or Mike Flanagan. I think
Oh,
so.
this is the toughest one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with me then. This one's really interesting. I mean, you look at like John Carpenter. John Carpenter is like the master. Like we talk about Alfred Hitchcock being like the master of suspense, like one of the founders. And he started before John Carpenter. But when you talk about the horror genre, you talk about the big names that basically started it all. And you have to talk about John Carpenter because Halloween was so influential in what we think about horror movies and the horror franchise, or the horror genre in general. And like John Carpenter started it all basically with, Halloween. He didn't start it all, but like he popularized so much of the tropes of the the genre that, it's like the foundation. And going through, he's got classics like Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, Christine, They Live later on, and In the Mouth of Madness. So a lot of like really great stuff early on with John Carpenter with Halloween and The Thing, which are like staples that many would consider to be the greatest horror films ever made. I think it's even like a debate, like, which is your favorite John Carpenter movie, Halloween or The Thing? And then now, what is the greatest horror film ever made, Halloween or The Thing? And I think both you could make an argument for. But then if you transfer over to Mike Flanagan, it's basically the same debate that we just had as far as classic versus new. Because with John Carpenter, if you look at a lot of his later stuff, it starts to get like lesser and lesser. Like I love They Live and stuff like that, but you could argue maybe that's more of a sci-fi film than a horror film, really. And you go on, and I know certain people love In the Mouth of Madness and things like that, but I just don't think his later stuff is as great as his earlier stuff. You look at Mike Flanagan, I think Mike Flanagan has been great throughout, started really great. Even if you look at something like Absentia, that movie is very low budget, but it has so many great ideas, and you can only see Mike Flanagan getting stronger and stronger all the time, going into a lot of his great films he's directed, to a lot of his great TV shows that he's directed. And you can see that he's done kind of more like TV as of late than movies. And most recently, the movie he gave us, Life of Chuck, what was barely a horror movie, but most of his career has been in horror with Oculus and Doctor Sleep and Gerald's Game and Hush, and a lot of really great like Stephen King adaptations. Not only that, but now you get to see him going into more TV with the Carrie series, with the Exorcist movie that he's doing, or maybe even a trilogy. I don't know. It seems like the guy's like more in demand now than like any horror director that's just going through and just getting so many different projects to go through, that I think Mike Flanagan is like the top name in horror today. And we were there like from the beginning. I was there like all the way back going to like 2016, I would say, is when I basically started, when Ouija Origin of Evil came out. I was like so hyped on this guy. And ever since he started doing Stephen King adaptations, I've just been like out of my mind in love with Mike Flanagan, especially knowing that he shares a deep connection to where Carrie and I live and have been, from for such a long period of time, is that I feel like a connection to him. I want to meet him one day. And I think Mike Flanagan has to take it for me right now, even though John Carpenter basically started it all. I think, Mike Flanagan is like going to continue to be the great new horror director that's going to keep giving us great horror. Whereas, John Carpenter, I think his best days are behind him. And Mike Flanagan, you could probably argue, is the best to ever adapt Stephen King, who is the greatest, in my opinion, greatest horror writer of all time. So, yeah, honestly, it is a competition, but it's also like, you knew probably where I was going to go, even though how much I love Halloween and The Thing. Still Mike Flanagan, though. I'm a Flanistan. Carrie, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I agree. This is probably like, I think it might be the toughest one on this list. Because I think John Carpenter has some of my favorite movies in horror. And again, he is just so foundational, like from the 70s onward into in the horror genre, and just completely changing it. Mike Flanagan is probably my favorite director, though. So it's like, do I go with the old classics? Like, is the Thing and Halloween like better than anything Mike Flanagan has done? I don't know. Like, he's done so much amazing stuff too, and he's been so consistent. Like, there hasn't been anything of Mike Flanagan's that I dislike.
Even Before I Wake is
Even
good
like
ideas.
Before
Yeah.
I Wake, yeah. Even though that's like probably his weakest thing he's done. This is difficult. I don't even know which way to go.
Well, because like with Halloween and The Thing, you have like influence and stuff like that, and so it's hard.
I mean, you also have mastery of the genre. Like, those are master, and they're two different. It's not like all the same thing. It's like Halloween is probably like the epitome of a slasher film. The Thing is like one of the best body horrors and psychological horrors ever.
But then it's like only weighted towards that, because like later on you get like some pretty bad horror movies.
I know
that he's
you
made.
do get some bad stuff.
That's why it's difficult to.
It does make. Oh, I love The Fog too. I genuinely just don't know which way to go here.
Go with your heart.
These are like two of my favorite directors.
We got a lot of lists to cover.
I know. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to cut all of this out. Who did you say?
Mike Flanagan. It's just for fun.
I know, but oh god, I can't make a decision.
All right,
I'm gonna go John Carpenter and leave it up to Hunter to decide.
All right, go ahead, Hunter.
Oh, down to me. Okay, I hate this position.
So I pushed the decision onto you.
No, that's fine. Mike Flanagan is one of my favorite modern horror directors, and it's because he brings every one of his films is different, and I appreciate that. You can't compare a Gerald's Game and a Doctor Sleep with a Hush or Before I Wake or Oculus. They're all different films, and they all have some sort of tie-in when it comes to family or some sort of deeper meaning behind them, which I love. John Carpenter gave us not only Halloween, which I think is right now my number 2 favorite horror movie of all time, right behind Scream. And I love They Live. I know that that's not technically a horror movie, but I love Roddy Piper in that movie. I think The Thing is an absolute masterpiece. I love Christine. I even really loved vampires. I think his take on vampires is really, really cool. Chad is right. There are a lot of misses in his catalog. Mike Flanagan doesn't have a lot of misses. So both of these are very, very hard. But as you guys were talking, I think the one thing that stuck in my mind, which leads me one way or another, is when I think of Mike Flanagan's best work, I don't think of films. I think of TV series. I think of his Netflix stuff, which gives him more time to expand a story. And this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about movies, and I think some of his movies are great. But I think
this is just a director bracket. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily just movies, but if that's how you want to think about it, that I would say most of these
film.
Most of these directors haven't done TV, so that's even as another notch on Mike Flanagan, as he's unique in the prep.
I was really looking at it like all of these were like film directors, but I also get what you mean. But I'm gonna go John Carpenter,
all right,
because of how much I love Halloween and The Thing and Christine, and I think these are classics that live decades ahead of time. Flanagan definitely will have some that will live the test of time. Right now, Carpenter has that edge just for Halloween by itself.
Yeah. I can't say I'm not bitter about it, but I also understand because Carpenter is just we've said it all, but you guys know how much I love Flanagan, but to see Carpenter move through, it's cool, especially because I think I might know where this next one is going to go, but we'll start with Carrie, and this is Mr. Wes Craven versus James Wan.
Yeah, it's gonna be Wes Craven. It's not really that close. Scream is all of our I think all of our favorite franchises.
Show some
are.
respect to James Wan.
I'll try to say something nice about James Wan. But I mean, yeah, and Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, New Nightmare, you know, there's and like oh, The Hills Have Eyes. Like he's just done so much that's just so outstanding. Truly
Music
a
of the
master.
Heart, you know, stuff like that. Your favorite?
Yeah, my favorite, Meryl Streep. James Wan, he's a great director, and I really like Malignant's pretty fun. You know, he really, I'll say he did make a lot, like I think he revamped the supernatural horror genre with The Conjuring, and you know, obviously like the torture porn genre with Saw. So he has done quite a lot, but Saw is really not even like, I don't really like Saw. I just rewatched the Conjuring movies and Insidious, and like I used to think they were so scary, and now I'm like, oh man, this is really cheesy. It just doesn't hold up the same.
Well, I guess if you like watch it over and over, it's gonna lose its effect.
think it's just
Also, having 16 movies in the universe doesn't help.
I think like that, yeah, and it's just like you watch Nightmare on Elm Street or you watch Scream for the first time, like those hold up. Like some of those scenes in the first Nightmare on Elm Street are just still so scary. In a way, I think that's just so classic. Anyways, I'm rambling and I've gone on way too long for a very simple Wes Craven.
So this one's actually not tougher than Carpenter and Flanagan, but this one's actually hard for me because I do love the Saw franchise. I think more and more I watch it, the more and more I love it. And I think what Carrie said really needs to be like talked about more, is that James Wan not only revamped horror one time in the early 2000s where he ushered in the torture porn era where you have Hostel and you have all these movies that follow it. He did it a second time with The Conjuring in 2013, where you also had movies that followed it, where it was Insidious he did, and then a whole bunch of The Babadook, which followed influence from The Conjuring. Like a lot of these supernatural horror films, I think that is a testament to how good James Wan is as a director, that he not only can revamp the genre once, but twice. And I think that's what Wes Craven also did. Wes Craven is also somebody who revitalized the genre not once with Nightmare on Elm Street, bringing in that supernatural element that was following in the late 80s, but also, of course, 1996 with Scream, where he revamped the genre, where you had, you know, all pretty much the entire rest of the 90s and the 2000s was based on Scream. It was the meta teen slashers that were in. So this is actually a really good matchup because both of these guys have reinvented the genre. But yeah, Carrie, this is kind of easy. It's Wes Craven. I mean, just for Scream by itself, I have to put it on there. But James Wan is a big, big player in horror.
Chad, what about you?
Okay, yeah. So obviously, I'm gonna go Craven as well, but I wanted to put some respect on Wan's name. This is also like a classic horror versus a new horror, you know, kind of a thing. But honestly, like I think it's a lot closer than people think. It's tough because I kind of think of Wes Craven as maybe the greatest horror director ever. Just like you guys are saying, like talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, you know, all these different like franchises that he's started. I guess just two there, but two huge franchises that are more good than they are bad. I mean, I would still argue there's no bad Scream film. And then even though there's some bad Nightmare on Elm Street films, every single one that Craven had a hand in, even writing the third one, they've been good. So when Craven has done a Nightmare on Elm Street, it's been really good. And then some of the, you know, he's had some like less than good horror movies, but some of his other like, you know, like just one-off movies, like The People Under the Stairs is one of my favorites. You know, it's just like you find so many different genres not genres, but subgenres of horror that he's done that's just like really interesting and really cool. And it's just like, when you see like Wes Craven Scream film or something like that, and you're just like, this is like classic. This is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And Wes Craven is just such a, rest in peace, such a great horror director. And I'm glad that he finally got to direct his non-horror movie, even though I don't think it was like the best movie. It still got Meryl Streep an Oscar, and stuff, but also just seemed like one of the greatest guys that I never got to meet. So and then with James
And
Wan,
also his version of New Nightmare, incredible.
oh yeah. And that, yeah. We don't have to go on a tangent about that, but James Wan, just like one of the, like Hunter was talking about putting some respect on James Wan's name, where it's like, it's a James Wan movie. That dude just knows horror like inside and out, it seems, because like he'll start just like Wes Craven. He'll start so many horror franchises, and then he'll leave, and they'll kind of get worse. You may still like them, but it'll kind of get worse. Like Saw, the first one is arguably the best, even though
Saw 2.
well, I don't know. I would say that the first or maybe the 10th is the best, but I would say the first started it all and ended up being I think still the best. Many would say is the best, I think, in that genre. And then Insidious, the same thing, and then The Conjuring, the same thing. The first two that James Wan did in The Conjuring are just so incredible. They're like, you can tell they're done by like a horror visionary. And then when he's able to, well, first off, also when James Wan pivots, maybe not as much in Fast and the Furious, but when he goes into making Aquaman, you find that Aquaman has some really good horror elements in it. And then, when he finally gets to take those like blockbuster franchise budget and is able to now, use that to make his own horror film, he makes a really awesome horror film like Malignant that's just like James Wan uncaged or whatever, like do whatever you want to do now, James Wan. And he makes this like crazy movie that people are like, holy shit, this is so weird. And
He makes a version of Dario Argento's Giallo films.
Exactly. And I just love that so much, that this guy can basically do it all. He can be a studio peon kind of guy, but then do it in his own style. He can make different franchises, or he can just do one awesome horror movie that's just his. And so I don't know. James Wan is awesome, but Craven, I would never be able to turn down Craven, although he might go up against someone else that we might disagree with. So we'll have to see. Let's get on to with the rest of the bracket. And next we have George A. Romero versus newcomer Zach Cregger, who's only got 2 movies. So we'll have to see how this goes. But Hunter, you can start with that matchup.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Okay, so this one is very interesting. George A. Romero gave us the modern day zombie. When we think of zombies, we think of Night of the Living Dead. I also love how in that first movie he cast a black actor, and that ending of that film, even though he keeps saying he did not write the movie to have this social commentary back in the 60s, it had that powerful message. I also love Dawn of the Dead. I think it's a really good sequel. I think it's really fun. It is more intense, more action focused. And then you look at his segments in Creepshow, which is really good. And the rest of them I haven't really seen. Like, I haven't seen Monkey Shine. I haven't seen Season of the Witch. So I don't have a big knowledge outside of the Dead movies. Zach Kreger, he only has 2 movies, but to me, he's knocked them both out of the park. I think Barbarian was such a great surprise when you look at not only the intense scares of that movie, the great jump scares, the great effectiveness, an entire 15-minute opening that could have been a different movie and it would have been just as great, and he immediately turns it on its head. I also love Weapons. I think that movie is arguably superior to Barbarian because it talks about so much, really nice, really cool content. I think the acting he gets out of his performers are really good. I know I'm not going to be agreed with, but I'm going to Zach Kreger's.
I love how Hunter finished that. He was like, I know I'm going to be on an island here, but I'm going Zach Kreger. Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Hunter, and I also really love Zach Kreger. I mean, I was a big fan of him watching Whitest Kids You Know, and I never in my, never ever watching that show would I have thought that he was going to go on to be a great horror director from
I
being just
keep
like
having
this.
his Lincoln skit stuck in my head.
I know, right? Like all these silly, sketches that he did on that show that are just so funny, but like, you know, a horror director, it's just so interesting to see people like him and Jordan Peele who just, start directing horror movies where you're just like, you were a comedian like just not that long ago, and now you're just scaring the shit out of everybody. And Zach Kreger, who's definitely one of the big names to do it nowadays. He had a one-off with Barbarian, and then he followed it up with Weapons, and people would say that's even better, like you said. And I mean, that got an Oscar win. It's an Oscar-winning film because of the supporting actors. Like that's hard. That's impossible to do, and he did it. And it's just like, what is he going to come up with next? I know he's doing Resident Evil, but like, he's going to dip into like franchise stuff and then, do some other stuff. And it's just really exciting to see where Zach Kreger is going to go next. With George A. Romero, like you said, like some of his non-dead stuff is maybe not as interesting. Like Creepshow is good, a really good anthology, but it's not just him that did that. That's, a bunch of different people collaborating basically. But with the Dead trilogy, maybe not some of the later ones. The later ones aren't as good, but with that Dead trilogy, just in general, I think it's just really incredible. Not just that first one, Night of the Living Dead, is like one of the classic movies that basically started like that zombie like genre or whatever subgenre. And gave us like the modern day concept of what we think of a zombie to be. But like that whole trilogy is incredible. There's some times where I think about Day of the Dead is one of my favorites. Just just so many great like lines and so many great ideas. Like Bub, the zombie is just incredible. Dawn of the Dead, I think, might be my favorite now, which is like, crazy to say. Some of the greatest like shots in horror cinema. It's just really, really amazing. And I love slow zombies, and I just love how different all three of those movies are in this franchise. Yeah, it's just really a great world that he built. And in a very like low budget way too. So I'd argue two great directors, but I think Romero is going to be my vote. What would you say, Carrie?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to have to be Romero for me. Again, it's so difficult with some of these to compare like a classic director who, whose work spans 30, 40 years to someone who is just starting out.
Oh.
Zach Kreger has put out 2 very solid, very fun and innovative horror movies. And I hope we again see so much more of that from him. But George Romero, yeah, like the entire zombie genre and the first 3 zombie movies he made are just I don't know if any other zombie movies beat those. Like they're all fantastic in their own way, and deal with social issues in addition to being really fantastic zombie movies. A lot of his other work is really fantastic too. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to Romero.
And I mean, you can even, and we'll talk about it more a little bit later, but you can even attribute stuff like Shaun of the Dead to George A. Romero because that's who they're honoring with that movie and stuff. So yeah, the legacy is real there. In like a few years, we might have to revisit this and talk about Zach Cregger when he's given us Resident Evil and then like a few other great horror movies. And then we're like, yeah, never mind. Zach Cregger's the greatest horror director ever, whatever. But like right now, it's only got 2 out there. So we'll move on, George A. Romero. And, but we're also right there with you, Hunter. We also love Zach Cregger. But Romero changed the game, So let's go ahead and put him there. And we'll move on to the next matchup. Ooh, I know where I'm going with this one. Raimi and Radio Silence. And we'll actually start with me. Yeah, I'm going Sam Raimi here. I do love Radio Silence. I think Radio Silence, kind of like Zach Cregger, they've been around a little bit longer. But I think like they have such a great talent. I think they're so smart. They make such a great team. And they make a lot of really fun movies. Ready or Not was an incredible kind of game slasher movie. That was such a cool it's like a home invasion, but it's not really. It's like, it had a great final girl in it. So bloody and so fun and funny and a lot of really cool moments in that. And then they followed it up later after their Scream stint. They did Abigail, which is like a really interesting vampire type movie there too, which is really cool. Not as good as Ready or Not, I don't think, but still had a lot of great ideas in there. And also had a very Ready or Not style ending. Like they have like a way of like, hey, we want to just make all these characters explode if we can. I just Radio Silence just has their thing of that. And then their Scream films, maybe a little divisive amongst the Scream community, but are still seen as really good horror films and really good Scream films. Even myself, even though I have issues with 5, I like 6 a lot more, but even 5, you can tell that even though I think that I don't love the direction they took some of the legacy characters in that movie, a lot of the great new characters they made are actually staples of the franchise now. That like if we go on to a Scream 8 after Scream 7, I want to see some of those characters come back. Maybe even if they can, bury some sort of, thing and bring Melissa Barrera back, or something like that. I don't know if that will ever happen, but if they could bring that back, maybe have Radio Silence come back in and direct Scream 8, or something like that. I don't know, but like, that could be kind of a cool thing. But I'm getting into the weeds talking about Scream right now. But Radio Silence has shown that they can do franchise, they can do just one-off films that are really great. And so every time Radio Silence comes out with a new horror movie, you're like, ooh, this is probably going to be something interesting and good. But with Sam Raimi has basically done it all. He invented the Evil Dead franchise, which has, some of my favorite horror movies. I love the first 2. I think Army of Darkness is really fun. They've even produced a lot of the newer Evil Dead stuff in the show. Sam Raimi, but also Bruce Campbell. And then you'd look at the Spider-Man films, which are amazing. Not horror, but they sometimes have horror elements. Like, Green Goblin is really scary. Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2 has some really scary moments, especially that hospital scene. And some of the very great jump scares in the original Spider-Man are really crazy. And then you have some other
Spider-Man 3 is a monster movie, by the way. It's Venom as a monster movie.
It absolutely is. And I actually really like that movie. But going back, I love freaking oh shoot, I'm gonna forget the names of the movies now. What is the other superhero movie that Sam Raimi did? Darkman. You have Darkman, you have The Gift, You have freaking Drag Me to Hell. Now you have the new Send Help. So it shows like he hasn't slowed down. I mean, he kind of had a little bit of a hiatus and stuff. He did another Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, which had a lot of great Sam Raimi isms. But like he has isms that I think are much stronger than the radio silence isms that we have today. It's just like the camera stuff that he's invented to, you know, show the monsters, the deadites moving in specific ways, and just, you know, showing the guerrilla tactics of going to a cabin and filming, you know, is just like a staple of like horror. Like the if you have a camera and some dedicated people and talent behind the camera, you can really go just make a horror movie and make it really epic and excellent, and then build upon that when you're able to get a budget and start to actually hone in on your craft. And I think Sam Raimi is kind of the best of doing something like that. So yeah, this is not a contest for me, even though I put respect on Radio Silence's name. I'm going Sam Raimi here. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Radio Silence, again, it's kind of the same thing because a lot of these have been structured as like, you know, the old school classic director whose career spans decades versus someone relatively new and up and coming. Radio Silence has put out some really fun, fantastic movies. Ready or Not is fantastic. Scream 5 and 6 are, you know, to come in and be able to do great Scream movies after Wes Craven is just phenomenal. But Sam Raimi, like the Evil Dead franchise, is just, man, so incredible. And a lot of his other movies, like just classics. And he really does. And he still has it. Like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was great. I haven't seen Send Help, but I've heard great things about it. You know, he's proving that he is still just knocking it out of the park in the genre. So I have to give it to Raimi.
Hunter.
So I would have gone Radio Silence, actually. And not saying anything bad about Sam Raimi. I love Sam Raimi movies. Me and my dad love the Evil Dead movies, and we watch those all the time. For me, Radio Silence films are very fun and very entertaining, and ones that when I want to watch a fun popcorn horror movie, I can throw one of those on at any time and know that like I'm going to have a good time. Ready or Not is a great one. Ready or Not 2, I think, is right on par with the first one. I think it's really fun, really gory. I love the twisting of the vampire lore in Abigail. And then you've got, as Chad said, I think the great thing is they're able to come into a franchise like Scream that has this loyal fan base. And whether you love the films or not, you can't deny the fact that they gave us characters that people care about, people remember from those movies, and scenes from 5 and 6 that hold up with, you know, scenes from the first 4 movies where they're really good, really suspenseful, and they did a great job in Scream 5 of paying homage to Wes Craven, of being like, your child is being taken care of in a proper way, which I love. Sam Raimi is the king of, you know, making low budget indie movies. The Evil Dead movies, I think, are incredible. I think I like Evil Dead 2 more than Evil Dead 1, and that's just a preference thing. Evil Dead 2 has more of a budget. Army of Darkness to me doesn't feel horror, it feels more like a comedy. And because it has more comedic moments, but you look at Send Help, which I thought was great. You look at Drag Me to Hell, which is, I think, a modern, like a 2000s classic horror movie. This was really hard for me, but I lean towards the style I like more, which is Radio Silence.
All right, so Radio Silence was Hunter's vote, but we're gonna go ahead and move on. Sam Raimi in the bracket. Love to, even if we have a clear, I guess not a clear because it's not unanimous, but like God, am I not spelling it right? Oh, it's the keyboard. Okay. A clear thing to still put respect on, all these directors' names because they're in the bracket because, of course, we think they're great. They wouldn't be in the
Mhm.
bracket otherwise. But moving on to the next one is Guillermo del Toro versus Robert Eggers. So another sort of classic and sort of new. Carrie, you start with this one.
Okay. Yeah, this one is actually a little tough. And I feel like these directors are kind of similar in that both of their movies are like not usually, except for maybe like The Witch, not primarily horror, but have really strong horror elements, and I would still consider it to be horror. Um, like Pan's Labyrinth and Frankenstein, I consider all of that to be horror. I consider, oh my god, like The Lighthouse and The Northman to be horror enough, but so like that's just what makes it a little bit difficult. I think though I'm gonna have to go with Del Toro. I think he's done a bit more work in the horror genre. And I think has really mastered it. Just the elements that he puts in. I guess Del Toro does have actually quite a few straight horrors. I'm like thinking back in his filmography now, like
Mhm.
Double Backbone and Kronos. Those are definitely horror movies, and Mimic. Yeah, I think I am gonna have. I'm so sorry. I'm all over the place. I'm just rambling. I'm gonna go with Del Toro. He's just got that classic gothic horror going on. Again, his filmography is so much deeper, and his horror filmography is so much deeper than Eggers. But Eggers is still fantastic, and I really love what he's been doing.
I wasn't laughing at you rambling.
And Eggers did Nosferatu. That's definitely. I'm all out.
No, I was just laughing because you mentioned Mimic, and I was like, well, that's not a great case for Del Toro.
No, but
Man, I feel like because I'm so young that like I'm going for the newer directors, but that's just
Rub it
because
in. Rub it in. Oh, you're young.
I didn't mean it like
Oh,
that. I
no.
mean, I grew up. I watched more of Eggers movies like when I was full functioning adult. And Del Toro, I have great memories as a child. I just don't remember a lot of his movies. But I'm gonna go with Robert Eggers mostly because his style of films, just like Del Toro's, I absolutely love. I love that gothic kind of period piece that they both do very well. Eggers, if you look at The Witch, is able to take this 1630s like New England, like very dreary style, and give us a really good, supernatural movie about family. The Lighthouse is about two people going crazy, and Willem Dafoe gives one of his best performances I've ever seen. The Northman, I think, is really good supernatural elements with a really good revenge plot. And then Nosferatu is a great love story with this vampire twist that is really, really good. Del Toro has some classics. I loved his new Frankenstein. I think that is incredible, but I just haven't seen enough of his work to really make a full-fledged decision. So I'm going Robert Eggers.
All right, yeah. So I mean, this is kind of how I thought this was going to go. And I mean, this is really interesting. I do think this is pretty close because I mean, honestly, these are two still kind of modern directors. I mean, I wouldn't say Del Toro is like that classic, but I mean, he goes all the way back to like the 90s, like the beginning of the 90s.
Yep.
So, he is a classic director in that sense. But in comparing these two, he's more classic because Eggers just started to come out in 2016, and
Yeah.
when he came out with The Witch, that was like incredible. I remember seeing The Witch in the theater, and you knew it was good because like my mom and my sister were kind of like, I don't know about that one because they were expecting a different kind of movie. They're expecting like your standard like jump scared type of movie.
Mhm.
This was not that. It was kind of marketed that way a little bit, but like when you actually saw the movie, we're like, oh, this is actually more brilliant than that. Where they're like actually like he's actually doing more of like a atmospheric kind of thing and a more true to the time kind of a thing, to where he's like and you know now that Robert Eggers is the kind of guy that loves history, and he loves taking, just like the actual like stuff of the era and making it so detailed to where like the actors are wearing the specific things that they need and talking in a specific
Mhm.
way that
It's
they would
very accurate.
they would have actually acted and looked like in that time. And I think that's brilliant. And I love when he does that, even if it's in a movie that I don't love overall, where it's like I love The Witch because it feels so original, and Nosferatu I liked but I didn't love because I'm like, even though this is like a great like new take on this, it feels like the same movie I've seen over and over and over with each Dracula and Nosferatu tale that I've seen. I'm like, I kind of feel like I've seen this already. Going back to even the Bram Stoker's Dracula, and from Francis Ford Coppola, and even the classic Dracula, classic Nosferatu. I understand that hits his homage to that, but still. And then with The Lighthouse, that's such a unique kind of cool thing too. And then The Northman, I wouldn't even consider horror at all. But if you go to who are we talking about? Del Toro, that's kind of the same thing. Is Del Toro's also not always done horror. So like Shape of Water, it's horror esque, but it's not really horror. It's more of like a romance drama kind of a tale, science fiction kind of a thing, with the horror tint to it. But then also, Pan's Labyrinth, I wouldn't fully consider horror, even though it does have horror elements with, like the creatures that Del Toro does like perfectly. But then also, if you look at, some of his other movies, he does like ghost tales kind of better than anyone's ever done it. Even when you look at stuff that he's produced, like The Orphanage, I'm just like, that
Mhm.
movie is incredible, incredible ghost tale. Devil's Backbone's incredible ghost tale. I love Crimson Peak, and I think that's an incredible ghost tale. And then even look at like the horror-esque like superhero films with Hellboy and Hellboy 2 that are like horror-esque, are just so good. I really like Frankenstein. It's kind of like uh Nosferatu, where it's like his
Yeah.
take on the Frankenstein thing that I think
These guys
still
really have a lot of similarities. I actually like that they really
they do.
that this was randomly put up like this.
Yeah. Um, and to see that, you know, I think Frankenstein felt a little more original than Edgar's Nosferatu, which might be a hot take. I don't know. But I don't know. I'm gonna swing Del Toro here. I've gone a long time just like kind of debating because these are both two great horror voices. I think Del Toro and Eggers both have their own style. I think Eggers
Mm.
is going to keep bringing us some great stuff. Like I'm excited for his Wolfman movie, and just
Yes.
like he's always like even if it's something you feel is sort of derivative, he's always still making it with his own style, and you got to respect him for that. And so I'm really excited for what he brings us further. And I'm also always excited to see what Del Toro is going to do, because he's
Mhm.
one of the masters. So also, yeah, I'm going to do it ever so slightly Del Toro for this one. I was going to go Eggers actually. And then Carrie was talking, then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go Del Toro just because I like Del Toro more. All right. Now we're moving on to Dario Argento versus Ari Aster. Hunter, you can go ahead and start with that one.
Dario Argento is a name that for a long time I have heard about, but did not know his films. Ever since we've been doing the decade bracket series, I've been getting to know him a lot because he in every decade he gives us some of the best giallo films. When you look at Suspiria, Deep Red, Tenebrae, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, just so many great films out of Dario Argento that he has really made his name in the giallo film industry. But Ari Aster, man, when he brings because he has 3 movies: Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid. I absolutely love Hereditary. I think Midsommar is almost a perfect film. And I have not seen Beau is Afraid, actually, but I heard it goes in a very weird direction. I'm super excited to see it. But just with Hereditary and Midsommar, I'm going to go with Ari Aster.
Wow, Hunter just kept it very short and sweet there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with this one. This one's tough only in the way that I think that like Hereditary for me is just weighted so heavily that I just think like when that was Astor's like debut, I was like Hereditary is like one of my favorite horror movies ever. But then when he went on to Midsommar, a movie that I like, but like I think is like kind of overhyped in a lot of ways because I have a lot of issues with Midsommar. And I feel like it is also kind of like not very original because it's like a take on the Wicker Man and stuff like that. Look at that kitty cat. And stuff, but it's still just like the way that Aster, even with all the issues I have with Midsommar, the way that Aster is able to craft it, I think is really incredible. Like the production design in it, the acting in it, the cut, the lighting and just everything with it is really, really good. Music, the score in Midsommar is great. So there's a lot of great stuff in it. He's just a great director. I also haven't seen Beau is Afraid, and I haven't seen Eddington, but also kind of feels like with Beau is Afraid and Eddington, it feels like he's more and more not as interested in horror. And it's like he just wants to be like a filmmaker that like Stanley Kubrick that goes in whatever direction he wants to go. And he might do a horror film there, might do a comedy next. And, so I don't even know about Aster as a horror director. So I'm just like really kind of confused in that. As if you go with Dario Argento, if you think of Giallo, which I don't have a lot of Giallo knowledge or Italian horror cinema knowledge. I've seen a few of them. I've seen some Argento. I've seen some Mario Bava, and I want to see more. And, we have a lot of them that, we still need to check out. But I feel like when you think about Italian cinema in the horror with Giallo films, Dario Argento is like the first name that pops up with Suspiria. That's like basically iconic in that style. And so many others that like for me, I think Argento just has kind of like more to his name that has been influential. Whereas for me with Aster, at certain times I can kind of take or leave Midsommar. Hereditary is a staple, but it's not enough to really supplant. We're talking about if this was a movie thing, I would take Hereditary over any of Argento's movies personally. But because this is a director's thing, I'm going to go personally with Argento just because I think his influence over horror in general says a lot more than Aster's overall. Carrie, what do you think about Argento versus Aster?
Yeah. Again, for the same reasons I've been saying, I think I have to go Argento here. He just has so many fantastic movies. I think he is clearly like one of the defining directors of Giallo, which is, I think, more foundational to like, I don't know, like horror overall, than we think about a lot of times. Like a lot of times I'll watch modern movies like something like Malignant or, even a lot of 80s horror slashers like Friday the 13th and be like, oh, this is a Giallo film, but it's Americanized. And Aster, yeah, Hereditary and Midsommar, again, they're absolute masterpieces, but it's hard at this stage of Aster's career to say. And I mean, who knows if he'll keep doing horror movies even. And I don't know if two For me, two phenomenal horror movies just don't outweigh Argento's entire filmography.
Totally fair. All right, moving on
Totally
to
fair.
Ty West versus Edgar Wright. I'll start with this one. And this one, even though you know me and Edgar Wright, is a little bit tougher because I'm just thinking about like them both and being horror directors and just think like comparing the two. And I'm just like, I love Edgar Wright. It's one of my favorite directors just in general of all time. I just, I've always been like an Edgar Wright guy, since Shaun of the Dead, seeing that in the theater and just like being so wowed, not even being a horror fan at the time, but just, loving Shaun of the Dead and, Scott Pilgrim and going on Hot Fuzz, The World's End, just seeing all of them in the theater. I think Cornetto trilogy is just one of my favorite, trilogies ever, might even be my favorite. I just love it to death. And then just some of his other horror movies he's done, like Last Night in Soho. Really, I might actually be running up against the wall because he's done like, The Running Man, and he did the Sparks Brothers. Yeah, that's right. Sparks. You could argue that Edgar Wright, kind of like in a Guillermo del Toro fashion, isn't like truly like a horror, like he is a horror director, but like he's also has a lot of interest in directing other things, which I think makes him like a very interesting director just in general. Like he can do so many things, but when he does a horror movie, it's awesome. And like you look at like Baby Driver is also not a horror movie, but like when he does horror movies, they're awesome. Like Shaun of the Dead kind of invented like making like it's not like a parody film, but it's like an homage, but it's like a direct kind of homage, but it's like it's a great horror movie. I think Last Night in Soho is a really cool like Italian style horror movie, just in a British fashion, not American, British fashion. And then also whatchamacallit, Hot Fuzz and The World's End, most people would say aren't strictly horror movies, but they kind of are. Like, Hot Fuzz is a slasher movie, and The World's End is like a sci-fi horror movie that takes Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So it's like the entire Cornetto trilogy to me is a horror trilogy. But you could also argue that maybe it doesn't dip its toe into horror as much, in that he's also more of just an action director and stuff like that. But when you look at Ty West does a lot of things great. And one of my favorite things that Ty West does is slow burn horror. Because if you look at like House of the Devil, you look at The Innkeepers, I think these movies are so fascinating because they just like, they'll keep you guessing and they'll string you along. They'll like really like just like keep slowly building. And then like the ends of the movies are like, holy shit, because like he's built it. And then at the end, you finally get the release. And you kind of like stop doing that with like X and Maxine, or not Maxine, but X and
Pearl.
And then Maxine. I didn't like at all. But X.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't like that one at all.
I love Maxine.
X, and we can debate that another time. X and Pearl, I don't love. I like Pearl a lot more than X, but I think X is still really good. It's gotten better over time for me. I think those are really good, but where I think the sweet spot is for Ty West is a slow burn. Ooh, this is tough, but I'm still gonna say that, like, for me, I think Edgar Wright is just the better director overall. No shade to Ty West, because I love a lot of the stuff he's done, especially the slow burn, especially because I think you guys may go Ty West. I'm not sure. I think Hunter would definitely go Ty West. I'm not sure about Carrie, but I'm gonna go Edgar Wright just because even like waiting like the entire Cornetto trilogy as like a horror trilogy, I think he just knows how to do suspense, mystery, and also like zombies, body snatching, alien horror, and slashers, and all wrapped that up into comedy as well. I think Edgar Wright just knows how to do it, and Ty West knows how to do it too, but in a different way. But I'm gonna give the edge to Edgar Wright, and yeah, let's see how this goes. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna give this to Edgar Wright.
Ooh, okay.
Again, and that's just my personal preference. I have such a strong love for Shaun of the Dead and
Mhm.
Last Night in Soho. And I know it's kind of like he's only done a couple horror movies, and Ty West filmography is definitely way more horror based. I don't, there's just nothing Ty West has done that I like as much as Shaun of the Dead. But this one is really hard because Ty West has such a great horror filmography. And I'm kind of talking myself out of Edgar Wright, but I'm gonna still go with Edgar Wright.
Hunter.
See, I as much as I love Edgar Wright, and I think the problem is, and Chad, you brought it up, Edgar Wright to me feels like a really good just general director, but I think his horror movies are really good. I think Ty West makes great horror films in the horror genre. And me personally, I think his X trilogy is incredible. I love X, I love Pearl, and I love Maxine. I think all three of them give us a really nice. Each film in the X trilogy is different. The X 2022 was your 70s Texas Chainsaw. Pearl was your really good 50s and 60s horror movie, and Maxine was that really good 80s era slasher. And I think he shows that he's able to do all of those genres really well. Edgar Wright, for me, what I think of Edgar Wright, Shaun of the Dead is great. I think of movies like Baby Driver, which I think is my favorite Edgar Wright movie. I would have gone Ty West, but Edgar Wright is just as good.
Yeah, we all knew you were going there, Hunter. We know you love Ty West. But
I do.
no, that's fair. We all knew I was going Edgar Wright, but it was actually a little bit tougher. You could see it was tougher for Carrie too, because they're both great directors. Both have great like horror vibes to them, but it is what it is. I don't know. It was a tough call, but Wright narrowly makes it there. So now I feel like we're going to go a little bit quicker with these because we've already talked about each director in length. So, we have 4 matchups that'll lead into kind of like the finalists that will go up to the final. We'll see who's going up in the final 4 that'll face off to find out who is our best director of this slate of 16.
Hmm.
And I'm very excited. Let's start with Peele Carpenter. Carrie, do you want to start with Peele versus Carpenter?
Yeah, it's gonna be Carpenter for me.
No elaboration. You're good on that.
I've said a lot
Okay.
about what I feel about them, but it's gonna be Carpenter.
Hunter.
I'm gonna go Jordan Peele. He's 3 for 3 for me.
I'm gonna also like Carrie. I'm gonna go Carpenter here just because we've gone through like the different older to newer, and like Hunter makes a strong case. Like Peele hasn't missed, Carpenter has, but
Mhm.
now that I think about like Carpenter is like a heavy influence, and like I would still even though Get Out I think is a masterful film, I would take like Halloween and The Thing over each one of Peele's movies
Mhm.
personally. So yeah, I'll move on Carpenter as well. All right, so now we're going down to Craven versus Romero. Wow. Hunter, you want to start with that one?
Yeah. George Romero gave us zombies, and it will always be appreciated for that. And I think his Dead movies are great, but it's Wes Craven, man. Like New Nightmare, Scream, like just icon, like Nightmare on Elm Street, just like iconic films. I'm going Wes Craven.
Yeah, if we're looking at like these two have created franchises that we love, with the Dead franchise, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, and stuff. As much as the Dead trilogy, I think is fantastic. Like I love Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead so much. Like Hunter was saying, even though like some of these franchises have iffy parts or like even total misses, like some of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, um, Romero still like created those, or not Romero, Craven still created those franchises and has, I think, a lot more one-off movies that are better than Romero does, with People Under the Stairs and stuff like that. So I'll also go Craven. What would you have said?
Craven.
All right. You're unanimous there with Craven. I still think Craven might be the greatest horror director ever. And moving on, now we have Sam Raimi versus Guillermo del Toro. Wow, I'll start with this one. This is clear for me. As much as I love Guillermo del Toro, Sam Raimi is like one of my top directors. You know, he's always bringing a horror tint to something, even if it's a big but like franchise superhero movie like the Spider-Man movies. It always has a horror edge to them. And that's why we love him. It's why we love all the great inventiveness that he's done, even when it's like the lowest budget possible to like a super high budget. He'll always bring you something great, entertaining and horrific and hilarious and just his own crazy, weird style. Whereas Del Toro also has his awesome style, his great production design, everything he does as an auteur. But also, you know, Sam Raimi makes a lot more, I think, straight up horror movies than Del Toro does. So I'll go Sam Raimi, Carrie. Raimi Del Toro.
Yeah, Raimi.
Hunter.
Yeah, I'm also gonna go Raimi.
All right, cool. I said it all. I convinced you too. They were gonna go Del Toro, and then I convinced them.
Yeah, definitely.
So we got to go Argento versus Wright, Carrie.
Argento versus Wright. Argento.
All right, Hunter.
Dario Argento.
All right, well, I'm gonna put respect on Edgar Wright's name. No, I'm just kidding. It's. I mean, I understand like where you guys are coming from because Argento is just like foundational in his specific, you know, genre. Whereas Wright, like you said, like doesn't always do horror, but when he does, it's great. But it's like Argento is more foundational. So we'll move on Argento. And you know, as much as if anybody was ever like, you know, loving on some of these modern horror directors, we ended up with the top four that are just classics. And with all of that being said, we get down to our final four. And we'll just go ahead and start up at the top with Hunter talking about Carpenter versus Craven.
This is tough, man. Both horror icons, both gave us some of the greatest horror films of all time. I gotta go Wes Craven. Just purely because of my love of Scream, the movie that got me into horror.
Yep. I'm just gonna look at this and say that, like, you know, Carpenter gave us two of the great horror movies, Halloween, The Thing, but Craven gave us two of the great horror movies of Scream and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then more so with like People Under the Stairs and Scream 2 and, you know, stuff like that. I was able to make sequels that are great. Some would say even better than the original. So even New Nightmare, some would say was better than the original, and even wrote, you know, Dream Warrior. So yeah, I think it's weighted a little bit on Craven's side, even though Carpenter was, I don't know, maybe more influential overall. I don't know. But I'll go Craven too. What do you think?
I feel like we're missing
some bars. I didn't do the bracket the best way possible, but just pick one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also gonna go Craven. I think just over like you guys said, Carpenter has so many, I mean, like Halloween, The Thing, The Fog, Christine, all fantastic movies, but I think he also has quite a few stinkers. And I think Craven has a couple of things that are not as good, but I think overall his filmography is just more consistent and solid than Carpenter's overall filmography.
Yeah, that's totally fair. You could say that Carpenter is more influential with the music too, like the scores and stuff.
Yes.
But so if you're factoring that in, kind of like the edge that I was trying to throw in with Flanagan in the TV, like he does everything. But you know, we all went Craven kind of unanimously here. Forget that there's not a next level to put his name at. Just remember we said Craven. And so we'll go on to Raimi and Wright. I'll start real quick. Wait, did we already do Raimi and Wright?
No.
We'd already Argento and Wright. I moved on the wrong person. That's what happened.
Yeah, it was Argento who
Typed the
won.
wrong name. I willed it and said, "Wait, you guys decided, but I have control of the keyboard."
He's like, I have the power.
All right, so I moved on Argento. So now we're going Raimi versus Argento. I'll start with that one real quick. It's going to be Raimi just because, I mean, I may be biased, but I'm not as in love with Italian horror. And it might just be that I just haven't seen a lot of it. But even then, you know, Argento is just like one aspect of it. And I haven't loved every single movie that he's made. I think Suspiria is great. I think, oh God, what is that other one that he did?
Deep Red is great.
Deep Red is maybe his best one. But then also
Brady.
the one with Jennifer Connelly.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenon.
Is amazing. So yeah, he's done a lot of really great ones that are so interesting, and I love the style. But Sam Raimi is just like created the Evil Dead series. I just love his, you know, guerrilla style. It can do it on a high budget, low budget, whatever. He's able to bring his own style. I've said this so many times now. So talk about Raimi, but I'm gonna go Raimi just because I love him to death. Hunter, or no, Carrie.
Yeah, Raimi, just personal preference.
Hunter.
Same, Raimi.
All right, we're unanimous on Craven, unanimous on Raimi. Now we got to pit them against each other. So who's going to go in that final column? We'll start with Carrie.
I think I'm going to go Craven. Raimi, he's gone outside of the horror genre for like significant portions of his career. And I think Craven would have liked the opportunity to do that and didn't really get to. Yeah, it's tough, but I think just Craven's overall filmography and his focus on horror throughout his career, and I think he was just solid from Last House on the Left all the way through to Scream 4. So I'm just gonna have to give it to Craven, I think.
Hunter.
This is so hard because it's my favorite franchise versus my dad's favorite franchise. My dad loved the Evil Dead franchise and got me into the Evil Dead franchise.
Nice.
But Scream means so much to me. It's, you know what? I'm gonna make it interesting. I'm gonna go Sam Raimi. Chad?
I did not expect that. Yeah, no, I mean, this is like really interesting because like we said, look at Craven with like two fantastic, you know, franchises that he started, a couple like really great like individual horror movies, and then with Raimi, he's got the one great franchise that he started, the horror, because like Spider-Man is another great franchise he started. That's less horror, but you know, still as a director is just phenomenal. But then Raimi, you can look and you can see so many different like individual horror movies that I think outweighs Craven. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think Craven has just given us more like ideas, like horror ideas, like the idea of being, you know, scared when you go to sleep, and the idea of, you know, what if the people out to get you are your friends and stuff like that, and Scream, and, you know, People Under the Stairs has another great, like there's so much great like social, like, you know, racial tension and stuff like that in that movie, that just Craven has given us so many great ideas that like Raimi also has like the best style of any horror director. Does his style, you know, you're watching a Sam Raimi film, which I don't know if you would necessarily say that about Craven just in general, that you know you're watching a Wes Craven film, kind of, but it's also just because like so many of his characters and stuff have ended up becoming like iconic and stuff like that. So yeah, this is tough, but I'm going to stick with what I've said before. I think Craven might be the greatest horror director we've ever seen. I'm going to go Craven. I'll give him the edge, even though I adore Sam Raimi. I'm so glad that this was like our top four because they're like the classics. you know, and a lot of these other people, like some of these guys in the top 4 aren't going to give us some of the best horror movies coming up. Maybe Raimi, I don't know. He's still got some juice left in his tank, but the other ones, not as much. I mean, one's dead, rest in peace. But then a lot of the other, you know, modern horror directors have so much more to give us that like the next director bracket we do, like maybe a few years down the line, we'll have a lot more to say about them. So I'm glad that like our classics ended up being in our top 4, and I'm glad that we gave Craven at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. We love you so much, Wes Craven.
Mhm.
We're sorry you didn't get to, you know, go and be like the non-horror director at sometimes that you wanted to, but whether you liked it or not, you made horror what it is today because of being you. Even going back to the 80s to coming, you know, to all the way to your last movie, the Scream 4, very divisive Scream movie, but still, like you created Scream, you gave us so much. And so thank you. And then thank you, Hunter, for devising this bracket for us. But what was your idea that you were talking about?
So next year, I want to do a March Madness new director bracket. So people from where we get, you know, a Jordan Peele, we get a Zach Kragers, because next year he's going to have his Resident Evil film. So we could do that. We could put so many other newer directors in there that we didn't get to put on this list. And I think battling them out against each other instead of people who have decades of long history against them would also be a really cool battle to see who would win.
Yeah. So that's awesome. This is such a great idea. And that we should toy with other ideas, and I think that would be a really cool thing to do, because I like doing brackets like this. We look forward to bringing you guys more brackets soon. We took a very long hiatus from our decades bracket series. We actually want to bring that series back very soon for you, starting probably around summertime. It started as like a summertime decades
Yep.
bracket. So why not do it years
It's been
later?
going on for 2 years.
More than that. But we'll
Really?
we like stopped 2 years ago.
I was we started either when I was pregnant with Elliot or when Elliot so
But-
either 3 or 4 years ago.
But that's okay. You know,
Yeah.
it's taken us a long time to watch a lot of these movies and stuff. But we're gonna bring it back, and I'm excited to announce once we're done with that series, a new series that we're gonna do. But I don't want to talk about that just yet until we're done with the rest of the series. We actually got to do that work first. But other than that, you know, just check out more stuff coming up, like roundups and other fun ideas we might have.
Movie reviews.
Summer movie reviews. I do want to do like at some point soon a Buffy discussion, because there's been a lot of news recently that I want to talk more about Buffy. But yeah, Hunter, other than that, I would say go ahead and close it out.
All right. So if you guys did enjoy this, please hit that like button, subscribe to Welcome to Prime Time, and remember, stay scared.